Hi everyone, here's a video about assessment. What everyone wants to know about right at the start, of course. Um, what I'll do in a little while is go through each of the assessment items in some detail and talk about the requirements for each. And before that, I want to make some general observations around assessment and university generally. Because for a lot of you, this is going to be the first unit you study at university. Some of you, of course, are old timers coming back for more, but for a lot of people, this will be the first time, or the first time in a long while, that they've been to university. So I want to make a few general observations to start with at the beginning that'll help you going forward. First of all, it's important to think about the purpose of assessment. It's not because we're sadists and we want to make your life difficult. It's not because we want to give you some busy work, because honestly, we'd rather not mark if we didn't have to. But there are important reasons behind assessment, and I think keeping your mind focused on what those are can often help you with those questions you have with, should I do this or should I do that with assessment? Is to understand, well, why am I doing it? So there's several reasons, and for me the most fundamental reason for assessment is the application of knowledge. It's the ability to move beyond the, we've discussed all these things, I've read about this, I've listened to a video about this, to can I actually do the things I need to do professionally? So for me, my own personal opinion is the most fundamental important thing about assessment is you being able to demonstrate that you can do something and to go through the process of doing it. So it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I can do this, I can do that, but to be able to then work through the process and figure out which areas you have difficulty with and to get help with those. And of course, if you need help, you need to be able to be working on that assessment consistently throughout a semester, not leaving it till the very last minute, because if you wait till 20 minutes before it's due and you say, I really need help with something, you can understand you're not going to be able to get that help in time. But ultimately, the fundamental thing about assessment is that application, and being able to give yourself the confidence in what you know and what you can do. And that leads to, I guess, the second objective for assessment, which is certification. So it's primarily about you knowing you can do what you need to be able to do, but it's also about evidencing that to others and being able to say through your results to, potential employers are usually the people who want to demonstrate it to, look, I can do the things I say I do, and here is evidence of it. Sometimes people put that first and focus too much on assessment being all about that external requirement of proof or certification and not about the learning itself. And again, I think that gives you a really negative approach to assessment, and you start thinking about assessment in terms of, oh, I've got to comply with this. This is just one more pain in the ass that I have to do this week. Whereas if you think about it in a more positive way and go, well, no, this is about me actually learning those skills I need, and that's going to be good for me later on. You still have to do the work, but I think it's a better mindset to come with it. And the third thing I think that's important about assessment is the ability to provide deadlines and to give you that motivation to structure what you do and to structure your time. So I think it's not the primary purpose of assessment, but it's something that allows you to say, okay, in the ideal world, I would spend all my time, studying and learning how to do things. But the need to meet assessment deadlines structures what I do and structures the way in which I approach it. All right, some other general comments before we get into the specific tasks. First of all, this is one that's comes up all the time, and I'm not sure why, is that when you are marked for an assessment piece, you start with 0% and then you get marks as you demonstrate that you've met the requirements of the assessment. And if you do better, you get more marks. But every term, I get students who are disappointed with their marks who say, but where did I lose marks? Where did I lose marks on this assignment? As though the assumption is that they started with 100% for this assignment, and then we started taking marks off for mistakes they made along the way. Now, I'm not sure that's not the way it works. I'm not sure where that assumption comes from, and obviously not everyone has it, but consistently each term there's always someone who says, yeah, but where did I lose marks? Where did I lose marks, and where did I lose them? You don't lose marks. You actually you fail to gain marks, if anything, and that might be a semantic difference, but it is quite an important difference. And that's where the rubrics for the assignments are important. Now, rubrics are a tool for markers so that markers can be consistent, but they also set the standards at each level for what we expect. And in this unit, we use benchmarking rubrics, so it's not one of those ones where you divide. You get 3 marks for punctuation and 4 marks for referencing and 2 marks for this. But basically, you have to have achieved consistently at each of the standards for a rubric. So the rubric will set, well, this is what we expect for at pass credit and higher levels for presentation skills, for research, for legal analysis or whatever. And you need to meet each of those targets at each of those levels to get that level of grade. So you can't be in a situation where you can say, well, my research is good and this is good, but my written expression is horrible, but I can horse trade these things and I can move my marks up overall, even though my presentation is horrible. If your presentation is horrible, if any one of those factors is horrible, you let yourself down across the board. So you have to achieve each of those benchmarks. But those rubrics will be online. They won't necessarily be online at the start of term, but they'll be online shortly after to give you a better idea of what to do with those assessment tasks. Okay, other general observation. I mean, I could spend a long time talking about assessment at this point, so I want to keep it brief. Another couple of quick points. One, make sure you plan your time. Your assessment will bottleneck at the end of term. And every time we have people say, oh, but I've got an assignment due in all of my subjects at the end of term. Well, that happens. You have an end of term assessment in every subject. And I'll say, well, but I've got assignments due all around midterm. Well, that's going to happen because they're all due around midterm. It's not some conspiracy of lecturers to deprive you of time. It's the fact that we have to be able to, in an orderly and logical way, set and mark assessment and get the results back to you. And the assessment will tend to fall in one of several weeks. So it's very important that you get on top of all your deadlines and your due dates and you manage your time. And some of your assessment you may need to start well ahead of when it's due in order to balance those things out. And that's what you need to do. And I do recommend, I know it sounds like I'm nagging, but starting assessment early is always very, where you can, is always very, very important. Because you never know what's going to come up and where you're going to need more time for this or that. So yes, plan your time well. We'll send you some videos and resources on time planning a little later, and they should be useful to you. But don't wait until everything's due at once and then write letters and complaints and say, oh, but I can't do it, it's too much, or ask for an extension because things are due at the same time. Because extensions you only get extensions for unplanned things. So usually they're things like ill health. And we can talk a little about that policy, extensions policy, a little later. And the last point, I know it's taking ages to get into it, but the last point I would make about assessment is always delete the first page of everything you're about to hand in for assessment. You have a very finite number of words for each assessment task, and you'd probably be surprised how often people waffle the first page of everything they hand in, at least the first 100 or 200 words, and it's often the worst 500 words, which is tragic if it's a 1,000-word assignment because you spend half of the assignment waffling. So again, a concept I want to come back to later in the term when we talk about writing skills, but quite often what you need to do is to be very, very severe with what you've created, and don't think of, often we have to write these things down in order to understand what we need to say. But then people often go, but I've written all these words, I've got to hang on to them, I've got to submit them. When ultimately, all they're doing is waffling for often for about a page and not actually picking up those marks as they go. And then they've got to try and get the marks they can in that last thing. So that's something that's common enough that I think it's important to mention at the very start, because it's heartbreaking how often you pick up a first year assignment and the student spends the first page or so telling you what the assignment topic is, or telling you how interesting the assignment topic is, or defining really, really key obvious points in the area that they should assume everyone knows when they come into it, and not getting to the point. So again, that's just an early reminder for something that's going to come up when we talk more about writing skills and assignments. Anyway, so let's have a look at the 3 assignments for this subject. and just discuss them briefly. We'll be talking a little bit about them more later, and we'll have more information and rubrics and things as well. So there are 3 tasks. There's a portfolio task that's due very, very early alert. That one's due in week 4. There is a problem-solving task that's due in week 8, and that will give you some feedback midway through the course, so you know how you're going towards the end of the course. And then at the very end of the course, there's a short essay paper. We don't have an exam in this subject. We're not required to have an exam by the accrediting body, and instead we have a short essay paper that gives you I think a couple of weeks to work on and to work around your other deadlines, but focuses on your ability to actually really to write a convincing argument. All right, let's go through each of those ones one by one. First of all, the portfolio, it's worth 20%. One of the things we require you to do as part of your studies, whether you be a law student or a criminology student, is to create a portfolio. And this is really important for you as a graduate, because you need to be able to collect all that evidence of the things that you can do, that you've learned, and skills that you have throughout your studies. And there will be a separate video on portfolios, so I'll be talking specifically more about what portfolio is. But there is a portfolio system called Portfolium, and that's really just like an online site where you can store your portfolios. And the university has bought a subscription for you with Portfolium, and you can keep that after you've graduated as well. So it's not like it's something that once you've graduated you lose access to. And that's just a place where you can actually store evidence of work experience, projects you've worked on, volunteering, everything that you've done, so that when you come to go to for a job interview, you're able to present evidence. When the job says you need to be able to do this, you can say, well, I can do this, and here's the evidence stored in my portfolio. It's a very important thing to have. As a result, we're making it an assessment task right up front to create just a basic portfolio and to require you to put a few things in it. Now, the good news is that if you do the 4 things you need to put in your portfolio, you get the full 5% for each of them. So you get 20%, 20 out of 20 straight up for doing it. So that's, easy marks and easy to get going, but there's a few little hurdles to go through to get those. So the 5 things you need is, first of all, you need to actually do the portfolio based on a template, or you can modify the template if you like, but the template's there to get you started. And that just has details of, what is it that you can do? What is it you can do now? And then as you add more as you go, as you study, your portfolio will grow with you. So that's the first thing. The second is details of core capabilities linked with some supporting evidence. So you're going to have to look around with for a bit of evidence of what you can do at this level. And then again, as time goes on, you add to that and you replace that evidence with better evidence of better outcomes. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the portfolio video as well. You also need to complete the iChange program that introduces the CQ University's role as a changemaker university and its work in social innovation. And that's something that makes our university distinct from all other universities in Australia. And so there's a link to that page to go to. There's some videos to watch and some material to read and a series of short tests. It only takes you a couple of hours to work through that. But when you complete the iChange course, you get a certificate. And it's a certificate you can stick in your portfolio. So it's not only good to introduce you to the university's changemaker identity and what social innovation is and what that means for you as a lawyer or a criminologist, but it's also really useful as an example of here's the first thing you're going to do to add into your portfolio. And the 4th thing you need to do is to create a short video where you talk about your ethos. What is it you believe in? What is it you think as a legal or justice professional? What is your core set of beliefs? What do you think your role is in the justice system or in the legal system? Again, there's more info on that, but this is not only something that's important to have you start thinking around your own professional identity, but it also proves to us that you know how to create, upload, and link a video into your portfolio, because this is a skill that's becoming very, very important. So if you can do those 4 things, you get 20 out of 20. You get your first 20% for the portfolio. And again, I've said it before, but there will be another video that talks about the portfolio in more detail. That should be up soon, and that will give you more guidance to those specific parts. All right, so the 2 other tasks are the problem-solving exercise and the short essay paper. Let's look at the problem-solving exercise. It's worth 40%, 1,500 words, so it's roughly 3 pages. What we will be doing was we'll be providing you with a legal problem, and by that point, by week 8 in the course, or in this unit, you will have learned a lot more about the how to think like a lawyer, how to solve problems like a lawyer, how to undertake legal research skills. You'll be presented with a legal task that does not require you to already have studied contracts or criminal law or succession law or whatever. So it'll be a task that will be within your skill set to be able to solve. You'll be required to do a little bit of research around it, and you'll be required to provide a solution and describe how you came to the solution. And that's the most important part of it. It's a bit like solving a maths problem. If you come back and you say, oh, the solution's 4,000, in maths it doesn't really matter, because what they want to know is how did you get to that number at the end. It's not about the number that you achieved. And it's the same here. That problem-solving exercise, it's not only about getting to that right answer, but it's also about being able to describe, and we'll have more details about how you do that, but being able to say that these are the stages I worked through in solving the problem, and being able to evidence to us that you get it, that you've understood that material up to that point in that course on how you go about legal problem solving. Okay, so the very last piece of assessment is the short essay paper. It's you have access to this from week 10, and you have 2 weeks to work on this, and it's 4 500-word essays, so they're about a page. They're really short essays, and they're on topics that are related to but are not the same as the weekly workshop topics. So the point of this is, if you've actually come along to the prepared to the workshops each week, and you've engaged in the discussions, and you've contributed and participated, you should already be 75% of the way there, because the questions will be relatives of the questions. So they're not going to ask you exactly the same thing. They're going to ask you something, though, that is similar, that will require you to just think about a problem in a different way, or to think about a different application of what you did in that particular week. So they're only about a page each essay. They're not going to be a lot of in-depth work, a lot of in-depth research in each of these. And what we're really interested in this one is not only your understanding of the law, or how to think like a lawyer, but the way in which you express yourself. Because each of these little short essays are to be really persuasive, well-structured, and just really good to read. Now, why is this not an exam? Because when you handwrite an exam under pressure, you can't do that. You can't edit. It's really difficult in exam situations, which this resembles in many ways. But an exam is a really kind of a terrible situation for you to be able to write well. So we want to provide an environment where they're similar to exam questions, and they're short, punchy, and they're focused on aspects of the course. But we also want to give you that time to be able to edit, to think, to ponder, to plan, to be able to write in a way that's structured. Now, there's some in the back of the legal research primer that's on Moodle. There's a little bit of a discussion about writing a critical paper, writing in an academic way, and that's going to be something we're going to talk about, and that's something to get you started. But basically what we don't want is just like what you get in an exam, which is an information dump of everything that someone can remember in the time that they can take to write it by hand. What we want is each of these 4 pieces to be a really well structured, and again, there's not much you can say in a page, but be really focused, to be really sort of laser sharp in your focus, well argued, backed up by good solid reasoning and good solid evidence as you go. So you're not going to be required to do a lot of external research. Yes, these things are going to, each of these, the problem solving exercise and this short essay paper will require you to reference where you are going to use a reference, where you're going to refer to something in discussion. Yes, we're going to require that you use the correct referencing for it, but we don't anticipate that you're going to be doing a lot of referencing in these exercises. It's going to be more about your argument and reasoning and demonstrating that understanding. And that gets back to the last of the little bullet points I made at the start. If you've got 500 words and you spend 400 of them restating the problem and talking about, why this is an interesting topic and defining key terms and whatever, you're not going to have any time to actually get into the actual interesting part of the discussion. And that's what we want to do. We want to make you this is an exercise for you to get better as writers. And if you get better as a writer here, you're going to do better throughout the rest of your degree. Because again, that's something that I think is not discussed enough. And there's often an assumption that the people who get the better marks at university are people who somehow know more or work harder. And I suppose, sometimes that is the case, that knowing more and working harder is very, very important. But often the thing that separates particularly your distinctions from your high distinctions, and particularly those mid-range marks to the higher range marks, is someone's ability to express themselves and the ability to get those arguments out there and represent them. Because you can know everything, you can know everything about the law, but if you can't actually discuss it and you can't present it in a way that people can understand, it's wasted. So that's, again, why we're putting that particular focus on writing here. So we can pick up some good skills that will serve you well throughout your studies. Okay, so there's an overview of the assessment tasks. We've got time to talk about them in class. You can talk to we can talk about it in teams. We can flag stuff for further discussion and have a look at more research. You can have a look at more resources as we put them up. I'm conscious of not trying to swamp you with information at the start, which we know we have. So I realise if I put up another 5 external videos on how to write well, that's not going to help anyone right at the very beginning. But I thought this video is there just to get you over that first hump of understanding what those tasks are, and more importantly, I think, the reasons for them, why we want you to do them.